All right, our next guest is a man who doesn't just understand history, he's helped make it. Former Speaker of the House and best-selling author, Fox contributor, architect of The Contract with America. He's back with a bold new vision in his new book, Trump's Triumph, America's Greatest Comeback. Newt, it's always good to have you on the show. How are you this morning?
Well, I'm doing great, and I'm very excited because Trump's Triumph, America's Greatest Comeback, is now a New York Times bestseller. So you know for authors how big a deal that is, and we're very excited by it.
I want to start out, I know there's a lot to talk about with Trump, but I'd like to start out talking about the former president, Biden. I know when he was in front of the cameras, he was clearly struggling at times with his health. There were times where I felt sympathy for our president. Did you feel any of that sympathy for him, or do you think that he chose that role and he bears full responsibility for those consequences of how it went down?
Look, I think as a human being, you have to feel sympathy for him. I think that clearly by 2003, he didn't really know what he was doing. I think it was almost elder abuse, frankly, and it is really a sad situation. So I always tell people I don't worry about Biden because I actually don't think he was there very much mentally. I worry about all the people who basically took over his powers and who behaved as though they were president, which I think is a pretty big problem.
Your book, Trump Triumph, seems to be making the case that our president is in full contrast of that, energized, focused, and equipped. What do you think are the core ideas or values that are going to define this second run in the president's office with Donald Trump?
Well, I mean, I'm largely in agreement with him. I believe in the work ethic. I believe in merit. I believe that we should place America first, which doesn't. Other countries should do the same. I expect the French or the Canadians or the Chinese to put their country first. I think that we should control our borders. I think when we have criminals in the U.S., we should, in fact, get rid of them. So there are a lot of places where I'm in agreement with President Trump, and I think he is historically very important.
I know the American people, including myself, were a little uneasy at this point because people keep bringing up that World War III thing and got Israel going at Iran. You got the thing in Ukraine and Russia that continues to roll on. At this point, as the American people, what do we have to do to try to keep our own country safe at this point? And is Trump doing everything he can to do that, in your opinion?
Well, I think he's been very careful in Ukraine for that very reason. I think that he has encouraged the Israelis, which, when you realize that the Iranian religious dictatorship since 1979 has been chanting death to America and death to Israel. And just a few months ago, the Ayatollah Khamenei, the head of the government, went on television in Iran and said, I want to reassure you that death to America is not a slogan, it's a policy. Well, when somebody says that, I think you ought to take it pretty darn seriously. And that's where we are. We have a dictatorship that's religiously driven that has said very openly he wants to destroy both Israel and America. They've been building nuclear weapons to be able to do that and building long-range missiles to be able to do that. And I think thanks in part to Bibi Netanyahu's courage as the Prime Minister of Israel and to President Trump's backing for Netanyahu, we have a chance to decisively break the dictatorship and eliminate one of the greatest threats that we face in the world. And I think if we do that, that will also send a signal to Xi Jinping in China and to Putin in Moscow. And I think the world will become dramatically more stable.
You mentioned nuclear war. You mentioned missiles. I know that we had a big military parade here more recently, but I got to be honest with you, Mr. Speaker, I'm more concerned with cyber attacks, or all of a sudden we all try to go to the bank and everyone's money disappears, or viruses or those types of things. Do you think that we should worry less about nuclear warfare and more for this new technology AI type war that I believe could be on the precipice of that? Do you agree?
Well, look, I think you have to worry about both. I mean, you can't, the world unfortunately doesn't give you a choice. It doesn't say which of these would you like to worry about, because they're both, it's sort of like if you went out back and you had an alligator and a lion, and I said to you, well, which one do you want to worry about? Well, you probably should worry about both the alligator and the lion, because they could both bite you. And I think that's where sadly, that's where we are, that we have these very complicated, rapidly emerging new threats, which includes biological as we all discovered with COVID. And so you have to have a national security system that plans for and develops the ways of coping with all of those things.
What do you think is our biggest blind spot right now from a national security standpoint?
Understanding how totally it is the point you made. It's not just about national defense in the old-fashioned sense of tanks and airplanes and what have you, but you need to think about all of national security. That includes cyber warfare. It includes the long-term manufacturing base. I mean, all these different things are there, and they're all real.
Having a chat on this week's episode with our former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich. He's got a brand new best-selling book out called Trump's Triumph, America's Greatest Comeback. I know, Newt, you've been a longtime critic of runaway spending, but this new, big, beautiful bill, to my understanding, is just going to add trillions of dollars to the national debt. Is fiscal conservatism no longer a priority, at least with this latest bill?
No, I think you have to see it as a continuum, but there are going to be 5 or 6 bills, and my Speaker Johnson's already working on the next couple bills. As you may remember, when I was Speaker of the House, we balanced the budget for 4 straight years for the only time in the last century. So I think I have a pretty good idea how you do that. This bill is a first step in that direction. It cuts taxes for economic growth. It cuts bureaucracy and regulations for economic growth. It begins to cut spending. We need a lot more changes. And I think, for example, if the Make America Healthy America Again movement, the MAGA movement, if it takes hold, we may take as much as 4% of the gross domestic product out of the cost of health care just by having people be healthier.
Mr. Speaker, I feel like I speak on behalf of most Americans. We're mostly simpletons. We want good things, peace, love, happiness. But when you hear things like we have this new DOGE department headed by Elon Musk and they're going to slash all this government spending, and then you hear about this big, beautiful bill, but then you find out that we're only going trillions and trillions of dollars further into debt. Seems as though we have so much money for war, but never enough money to feed the poor. We as American people, really, we feel helpless. So what can we say? What can we do?
They should demand a path to a balanced budget, which is what we did in the 1990s. When you balance the budget, you start reducing the debt. You reduce the amount you're paying for interest on the debt, and you have a much healthier economy and a much better future. So our basic goal should be to balance the federal budget, and that's going to take 5 or 6 bills. I mean, Biden and the Democrats have left us in such a total financial mess. It's almost like you loaned your brother-in-law your credit cards, and they ran the debt on your credit cards so high that it's going to take you a couple years to pay them off. That's kind of where we are.
I know back in the 90s you were a lightning rod for criticism, but on the flip side, you were Time Magazine's Man of the Year. Did any of that ever get personal with you, and did the public pressure ever affect your health, your sleep, your spirit? Because that was a very stressful job at a very stressful time.
No, it didn't actually affect when I got tired, but I don't take stress. Look, I really have a deep faith in God, and I really relax, and you do the best you can every day, and then people got to figure out what they want to do about it. But I tried very hard never to take attacks personally, and I tried very hard not to worry about things. I mean, I spent 35 days in a room with Bill Clinton one-on-one negotiating the balanced budgets. You just had to relax and talk and try to sort it out. I try very hard to avoid tension and stress because I don't think it gets anything good done. It harms your health, and it actually slows down your ability to think about solutions and to focus on getting positive things achieved.
Faith over fear, Newt. That's what I always tell my kids. Faith over fear for sure.
I like that. That is a great line. I like that very much. As of today, I'm stealing it.
There you go. It's all yours, man. Put it in your next book. Who was the most intimidating person that you ever negotiated with?
I don't think anybody's particularly intimidating. I think that, Tip O'Neill was amazing because he was physically huge. I was a very junior congressman, and he was pretty impressive. But we weren't negotiating very much. He was just yelling at me. I think negotiating. Well, the greatest disappointment was trying to get President George H.W. Bush to understand that he could not break his word and raise taxes. And I just failed totally. I could not get his staff to understand that, having said, read my lips, no new taxes, his entire conservative base would be shattered if he caved in and agreed to a tax increase. And they decided they were going to do what they were going to do, and they didn't want to hear about it, and they didn't pay any attention. And unfortunately, I was right, and I think it cost him his reelection.
If you could take one former U.S. president to dinner, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Lincoln. Lincoln is the, I think, probably smartest person ever to serve in the White House. He had an extraordinarily complicated job trying to hold the North together through 4 years of a very bitter, very painful civil war. And he did it brilliantly, and while doing it, he freed the slaves, kept the Union alive, and did it in a very humane and compassionate way. He and Washington are in a totally different league from everybody else, but I think in Washington's case, he probably was almost too aloof. I mean, having dinner with Washington, I can imagine chatting with Abraham Lincoln. I don't think I can imagine chatting with George Washington.
All right. Now, what about a president, either dead or alive, that you would love the opportunity to have a debate with?
To debate?
Yes.
Barack Obama.
Do you think he would ever take that call?
No. Why should he? I mean, it wouldn't accomplish much.
And what would you love to debate him on? A specific policy? I'm sure there's many of them, but what's the one that really gets under your skin?
The degree to which he incited racism. I mean, if you go back and you look at his comments, he is consistently using language that's racist. And I think it'll be not so much a debate, it'll be a fascinating conversation to raise that issue and ask him, why would he do that? And he did. Almost every incident, he ended up increasing racial tension.
I will say I do have some liberal friends, and they would say the exact opposite. They believe that this president is dividing us and is as racist as they can be. I have a friend, I think I even told you this on a previous show when you were on. I have an American flag on my mailbox. We have an African-American that works here at the studio. He says that when he sees that flag, he thinks racism. That's what he thinks. And I'm like, well, I'm sorry. I'm going to keep waving my flag. I'm not racist, but there are people out there that believe that this president is very racist.
Well, I understand that, although he did get the highest percentage of African-American vote of any Republican since Eisenhower. And I think that's because there are a lot of younger African-Americans who are tired of being lied to. They're tired of the system not working. They're tired of being told that the mayor of Chicago or the mayor of Los Angeles is the best you can do. So there are changes underway. But, the only thing I'd say in defense of America is we fought a difficult, painful civil war. Over 400,000 people were killed. And in the process, we freed the slaves. We went through a long period of gradually getting rid of segregation. And we have done enormous things to improve the quality of life for all Americans, not just African Americans, but Asian Americans, Hispanic Americans, people from all over the world. And I think that there are enormous opportunities in America today for people of all ethnic backgrounds. And you obviously have challenges. I mean, there are every ethnic group has distinctions from other ethnic groups. That's just a fact. But I think that it's amazing how much you can, in fact, create a country where everybody has an opportunity for a better future.
Newt, if one day your grandkids asked you, and maybe they have asked you this question, Grandpa, what was Washington really like during your time? What is the one thing you think you'd tell them that the history books will never tell them?
I don't know the way you put it. I would say to them that, because my career in Washington spanned the end of the Soviet Empire, the end of the Cold War, the remarkable period of dealing with Reagan, and then, frankly, the rise of Bill Clinton, who was a moderate Democrat, much more centrist than any Democrat who's followed him. And I would say that it was a time when You could work with each other, you could argue with each other, and at the end of the day, you could sit down and have a drink and chat. And that was a pretty healthy environment.
Well, hopefully we can get back to that. This is an off-the-topic, not political question for you, but the fans want to know what songs are on the speaker's speakers. What kind of music does the speaker like to listen to unwind?
My telephone, when you call me, is ABBA.
Okay, so you like some disco. You like to get down. You're a dancing queen.
So that's the dancing queen is for everybody except my wife, and my wife gets Super Trooper.
Okay. All right, Mr. Speaker, it's been a pleasure having you on. Make sure you go read his New York Times latest bestseller. He's got a handful of them. Trump's Triumph, America's Greatest Comeback. Mr. Speaker, always a pleasure having you on. Really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.